Continuing my series with the most commonly asked questions at some of the most successful companies, today I will talk about the 24 most asked questions in Google interviews. And first things first, you should, if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I also shared questions from other companies such as Amazon or Facebook. And the first thing that you should understand is that Google is a lot less focused on the behavioral part of their interviews when compared to companies such as Amazon, for example. So probably the equivalent of Amazon's 14 leadership principles would be Google's 10 things. But that's as close as it gets to behavioral questions. Also, before we begin, I would assume that you already know by now that the best way to answer such questions are with the STAR method. That is to talk about the situation and task, then to give a few sentences for the action, and finally the results. So without further ado, let's just get to these questions. The least asked of the 24 questions is, tell me about the time when you were not able to meet the time commitment, and what prevented you from meeting it, and what was the outcome, and what did you learn from it. I'm assuming you're not familiar with behavioral interviewing if you're watching this video, or you're not too familiar with this thing. So shortly, in a few words, this is a negative story, a time when you were not able to meet the time commitment. So probably the most important piece of information here is to talk about a genuine story where you are not able to meet the time commitment. But even more interestingly, how do you know it's a good story? One that actually had an impact. So because you weren't able to meet the time commitment, something happened, some measurable, some quantifiable outcome. These are the best stories. So the first advice is to be genuine, and the second thing, very important when talking about negative stories, is to talk about your learnings. So if you remember the STAR method, the result should be with your learnings from this thing. So I haven't seen anywhere where Google to endorse the STAR method, but it's, in my opinion, definitely recommended to do it. The next question, let's say you're working on a major project and you're in the weeds. How do you find your way out? Now, the difference between this and the previous question is that the original question was a negative one. Here is a challenging situation, so I would very much go with the positive outcome in this case. And it makes all the difference because, you know, especially for the results section, you could quantify the achievements here. So again, it's a slightly differently nuanced question, but the answers are very different, and you should employ a different strategy while answering this. Next, what did you do when you need to motivate a group of individuals? So again, probably this won't come up in applying for a junior developer role, but rather for more senior roles. But still, when motivating a group of individuals, there are some key elements you must talk about. Here's how you took your time to listen to what they had to say, and how you coached them, and how you build up a program, and made it an engaging experience, if you want. Next, a time when you were faced with a problem that had multiple solutions. This could be in a technology context, if you want. So a problem that had multiple solutions. How did you go about your decision-making process? How do you find the best possible solution given that specific situation? So actually, I see usually there are a lot of people who have a hard time coming up with an example on the spot. So I would very much encourage you to prepare this in advance. And the way you find this, the easiest way to find examples for this was to think about decision-making, times you took a decision. And more often than not, if you zoom in or zoom out of the situation, you were confronted with multiple options for that decision-making process, and inherently with multiple solutions. So you should focus on the how. How did you arrive at this? Or maybe you called in for external help. Maybe it was something else. But anyhow, let's say you need something important from a coworker and that person isn't responding. How would you deal with this? So this one talks a bit why they would want to ask you this question. Such a question gets asked in case they are interested about your interpersonal skills. So how do you deal with other people? Are you easy to get along with? Can you be productive in a high-performing environment, which is not always an easy thing? This is what they're looking for, other than, of course, a genuine story about these things. Tell me about the time when you worked with a difficult team member. It's again on the same topic of interpersonal relationships, and what you shouldn't forget to talk about here is how you listen to the other team member and eventually how you earn their trust in order to reach the best possible outcome from this situation. An example where you had to push back to HQ or challenged a decision. Why they would want to ask you such a question? Actually, for many things. Some people have a tendency to come up with a weak example for such situations, in the sense that so when you challenge something, they are not really challenging that situation, but said they would rather go with the flow, but make it sound like they had a little bit of challenge there. So try to come up with a strong example here. And by the way, the outcome of this doesn't necessarily have to be that you successfully managed to convince your manager or your HQ about your solution being the best. It could be something like maybe your idea wasn't the best. You challenged it. Even in the end, it turned out to be their idea which was the best. You followed the decision and moved on, successfully delivered on what was previously agreed. So this would also be a perfectly viable example that I very much encourage you to use. Everyone starts somewhere. Talk about the time when you were new on the job and had a lot to learn. How did you manage that? By the way, I posted all these questions in the video description, if you, just in case, so you should know, you don't have to note everything down. So a time you were new on the job, why they would ask you these such questions? Well, because they are interested to see your ability to learn, and whether you're someone genuinely curious to learn on your job, because needless to say, it's an essential quality you must have when working at a company such as Google. So your ability to learn is something very, very important here. And for example, one of the pitfalls here, one of the mistakes that people tend to do is they say, hey, I took everything by myself, and I stayed extra hours every single day, and I eventually mastered the whole thing in 1 week. What they are not talking about is how they probably also took advice from their new colleagues, probably also reference some external sources here. So you see, this learning experience doesn't have to be something you do as a solo initiative. And this is something I would expect many people to say, actually, in job interviews, especially the people that tend to be more introverts. So make it sound like you also successfully took ideas from other people, from other sources as well. So these would be something that you would want to be careful about. Describe a long-term project that you manage. How did you keep everything moving along in a timely manner? These, of course, these types of questions are, of course, more for like management roles or for rather more senior roles. And the reason why they would ask you this is because they want to see how you, first of all, if you have an example of a sufficiently interesting project, because if you talk about a type of project that you successfully delivered over 3 months without any events going on, that's a boring project, a boring answer. So they want to see whether you have something interesting to talk about here, and you should probably prepare about the more interesting projects you've worked on throughout your career. And if you manage to add some spice some interesting information to this to these types of situations, you will see that you will have many opportunities to focus on your strengths. So if you think about 1, 2, 3 strengths that you have, make sure that you mention them within this context of time when you manage a project on the long term. So this is, needless to say, this is a gift that they give to you. So you must do everything you can to take advantage of it. Tell me about the toughest decision you've had to take in the past 6 months. So everyone has to take decisions on a daily basis. And by the way, in a professional context, needless to say here, if you think of an example, it will be, the challenge here is not that you have not decided on something. The challenge here would be to find something significantly interesting enough that you could use in your example. So this is the main challenge here. When you decide on something significant in the past, how do you know it's significant? It had an impact by measuring its impact. So think about something that had a true impact here. Next, what's your strength and weakness? As I said just a few sentences back, it's important to know your strengths, because whenever you're receiving a question that would allow you to self-advertise in a way, to not talk about you in a negative context, you should basically talk about your strengths. And also when being asked, tell me about yourself, you should talk about your strengths. When they ask you why do you want to work at Google, you should talk about your strengths, between others things. So this is for the strength. The weaknesses. The weaknesses, the greatest risk here with weaknesses is that you will talk about, you will put a positive of strength as a weakness. You turn a positive into a negative. For example, you pay too much attention to details, or you see, it's all these things that you could say are strengths, but you look them from a weakness perspective. Also, I wouldn't necessarily go with using work-life balance as a weakness, because this would make you a less interesting co-worker, co-team member. So whenever they ask you a question, they will be screening you on one or more of the following 3 things. First is this person someone who I enjoy working with on my team? The second is, does this person have the necessary toughness to get the job done? Because when dealing with teams of high performers, there are challenges, if not challenges, differences in ideas and opinion. There are many other types of challenges. And the third one, whether if this person is genuinely interested in the job, which, if you believe there's any chance of not being clear and explicit enough, you could say maybe towards the end of the interview or whenever you think I really want the job. It's not a bad thing. It's just I think about it. All right, so we were talking about the weaknesses. So it must be a real weakness. For example, introversion, or you can be too assertive at times. Or, for example, if you're someone really technical, you could talk about sales as a weakness. If you're someone from sales, you can talk about the technical experience being a relative weakness. Next, give me an example of a time you faced a conflict while working on a team, and how do you handle that? Again, this is a conflict situation. It doesn't have to be a negative outcome. I would rather go with a positive outcome, because I want to be positive throughout the interview, because positivity sells much better than negativity usually. While working on a team. So it's very important that you think about of this in a professional context. And if you're a recent graduate, of course, in a project that you worked on recently. Conflict means you must listen, you must employ diplomacy, you must show interpersonal skills, and you must communicate, set up meetings, discuss with the various stakeholders multiple times if needed, and so on. Tell me about the time when you recovered from a difficult situation. This should be a positive story, but you should add some drama there, and should talk about a difficult situation. And the way you know it's difficult, because it had a significant impact on you. You must really ensure that you convince your interviewer that it was a tough situation from which you wanted to get out of, and of course in a professional context. Needless to say, everything they would ask you in a behavioral part of an interview is in a professional setting, unless you really cannot find anything, so you would go with a more personal one. Tell me about the time when you missed an obvious solution to a problem. Again, this is something you would want to think of in advance, because these are, more like the brain teasers that are still used at Google, and there's that. I mean, in any complex problem, you could argue that there was an obvious solution, if only you have dived deeper to understand the bread and butter of the thing, or had you taken some external advice on what to look at. In fact, I skipped one here. Tell me about the time tell me about the time when you took the lead on a difficult project. This would be another one. A time when you took a lead on a difficult project means a time when the going was rough, and you decided to step in, or you were assigned to step in. That also works. But be very careful that you show your leadership, your ownership of this project, because more often than not, people put it in a context like, I went there, I planned the project, and it went well. You see, so there must be some drama there. So make sure your example is a compelling one here. Tell me about that when you came up with a new approach to a problem. This is because they want to see how you can probably simplify, if not invent stuff, come up with your decision making, and within an innovative environment. And it's often that the most innovative people call in for external help, contrary to many others, to the expectation. So also take in mind to take opinions from everywhere you can while talking about this example, right? So in your example, consider talking how you took ideas from multiple sources. Describe a time when you found it difficult to work with someone from a different background. Interpersonal skills, multicultural environments. I think we touched upon this one pretty well throughout this video. Tell me about the time when you had to deal with ambiguity. So the main reason why they would ask you this question, because they want to see how you're able to dive deep into a problem, to understand the various elements that influence that ambiguous situation, seemingly, and they want to see your thought process. They want to see also your decision making. They want to see how you can deliver results within ambiguous environments. Maybe you could come up with an example where results were required immediately and the situation was ambiguous, and how you managed to successfully, of course, arrive to the best possible decision. Next, actually, this one is the sixth most commonly asked one. Tell me about the time when you made sure a customer was pleased with your service. So, unsurprisingly, Google is also a company that cares about customers, and these one, the customer-related questions are usually pretty high on companies, on most commonly asked behavioral questions at other companies as well. Not as much as Google, because Google is more like with long-term projects, with AI and all that stuff. I'm comparing with the Facebook's hacking culture, and with Amazon's being with all customers is always first, and customer obsession, all that stuff. But still, also at Google, these questions might arise. And basically how you want to go about about these things is to talk about how you started with the customers and work backwards from there. Like, customer is always first, and you understand the need first, and then you work backwards from there. Also important to understand what's your first customer, your direct customer, right? Not your secondary, tertiary, and all that stuff. On number 5, most commonly asked question, we have describe a time when you improved a process with a limited budget. So this actually asks for an answer that shows frugality. So when you're frugal about about implementing something, this could be done through standardization, for example, or this could be done as an invention, but make sure you also show curiosity whenever you can, and also be open to ideas, to outside ideas. I think we touched upon multiple times throughout this video. Number 4, it's another customer related question. We all deal with difficult customers from time to time. Tell me about a challenging client facing situation and how you handled it. Needless to say, I mean, you should always start, as I just said, you start with the customer and work backwards from there. Think about the situation, and important here, a challenging client-facing situation. Despite the fact that you're talking about a challenging client situation, or in spite of the fact that you're talking about such a situation, you should make sure that you have that sense of business acumen. You understand the dynamic of the situation so well that you don't get your business, your employer, in an unprofitable spot, right? So it's not necessarily always about image. It's a business exchange. You give something, you must take something back. This is very, very important. I don't see many people, especially technical people, understand about answering these customer-related questions, which, as you can see, they are quite commonly asked. Number 3 most asked question at Google in Google interviews is, tell me about a team project that you worked on, which, by the way, could be the most successful project you've ever worked on. So this is a gift that they give you in order to see, hey, what have you been working on? And needless to say, you must prepare these things. Even if it takes you one day to prepare, tell me about the team project that you worked on, you should definitely spend the time to ensure that it's a proper answer. And of course, in the star format, in a quantifiable results, talk about your role in the team, talk about whomever else you are working with, talk about what was the goal, why was important. And yes, make sure that example is a compelling one. This is how it should go. The second most commonly asked question at Google is, tell me about the situation where you had to resolve a difficult problem. So the main reason why they would ask you for this is not only to see your problem solving skills, but whether you have had difficult problems. Whether you're the type of, you see, interesting people deal with interesting problems. So you should actually take the time and find the best possible example for this specific scenario. It's not just, we had a small problem. We had 3 bugs, 3 cosmetic problems in the software, and we had to address them. It's not just that. You must really find a difficult problem that maybe it was an emergency, a true emergency, or maybe you were at risk from losing. There was a lot at stake there. This is the best way to put it. So this is how you should work, and then frame it in a star format, and that's it. And finally, unsurprisingly, the most commonly asked question in any Google interview is, why Google? Which, by the way, as unsurprising this question is, you'll be surprised how easy it is to miss the opportunity to score points on this one. What most people do and ask why Google, they praise Google and move on, right? Like, yeah, Google is a very innovative company. I get to work with the most smartest people in the world, and I very much want to be part of the journey, right? There's nothing wrong with this, except that everyone says it. There's nothing wrong. you do not differentiate yourself from other people applying for the same role. And as you might know, that there is quite a bit of competition with this thing, so you must find a way to differentiate yourself with this, especially with this question. So a better way to answer it would be, I want to work at Google for 3 reasons. The first one, okay, you praise Google, if you choose so. If you could entirely skip this one if you want. But the second would be, how can you make a difference there? Can you think about something throughout your career that would highlight you as a great candidate for this? Or if you're a recent graduate, you know, something that would set you apart from other candidates. Of course, some sort of strength, some sort of project, these types of things. And the third reason, what's in for you? Why do you want to work there? I mean, there are many other companies, innovative companies, that are very good with AI and all that stuff, and many other profitable companies as well, if you're not applying for a technology job. But why do you want to work there? What's in for you? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? These are the types of questions that should actually trigger the differentiators that you would want to speak about when applying for such a role. So there you go. This would be the 24 most asked questions at Google. Of course, I'll link them in the video description right next to that like button. And as always, I hope you found this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.